Welcome back. Tom Gray has spent his career helping brands design experience that people love to show up for. And increasingly, they even pay for them. As the chief strategy officer at the Imagination Group, a global experience design consultancy, he helps brands and organizations to develop game-changing strategies and experiences for customers, employees, and stakeholders. Today, we're going to get into why in real life is the next big brand opportunity and what it takes to even charge for it. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
This topic is so exciting to me. You've said we've moved away from attention economy to a connection economy. Can we start by breaking down what that means?
For sure. So attention economy, I think a lot of marketers are familiar with the idea. It's just putting a name to this idea that you're trying to get eyeballs. And I suppose eyeballs is the shortcut, right?
Huh.
And everyone is fighting over the eyeballs, and whether it's buying spots in the Super Bowl or Google ads, it's like we need to get our message in front of people. And so yeah, you're effectively competing for people's attention. And then with the rise of social media, of course, then the question became, well, how do you get into people's feed? And again, it's this competition for attention. It hasn't gone away. It's obviously still a really important part of the marketer's toolkit, depending on what you're trying to do. But I think that you and I and your listeners can probably feel it and sense it, that there is a turn of the tide away from spending time on social media. There's, the conversations about, addiction, about mobile phones, all of these sorts of things, that it just feels like there's a bit of a swing away from, spending so much time in online and in social media. And so I think that combined with, so that's on the sort of behavioral side. On the kind of technology side, of the algorithm side, well, AI, and I know we don't want to talk too much about AI today, but AI and has really changed the game if you're in the market for eyeballs, right? It's becoming harder and harder. But I think both of those things have created sort of consumer behaviors or just kind of human behaviors where people are increasingly asking what it is to be human and seeking more authentic ways to spend their time and essentially like reconnect with each other and reconnect with what it is to be human. And much of that happens in the real life, right? So putting down the devices, digital detoxing, all of these things, that's the shift that I think we're seeing, and people just reconnecting with real world experiences.
Have you found this too, that social media back in the day, your feed was people you followed and cared about. So you got to cultivate and actually connect with people when you went into social media. And
Yeah.
now, because of the shift to interest media or whatever the algorithm thinks you should see,
Yeah.
that you don't get to connect with things for more than, 3 seconds anymore.
Absolutely. It used to be the place where you'd catch up with your friends or people you were at school with and you'd lost touch with. I was reading a piece of research today, actually, that so academic researchers who had run the numbers, and they reckon that 93% of what we see these days is algorithmically fed to us, rather than, so it's 7% of your time is looking at content created by your friends, and 93% of the time is looking at content that's fed to you by the algorithm. That's yeah, I mean, it sort of stacks up, right? If you think about what you spend your time on, but it's the logical outcome of the business model of these channels. They need to serve ads, and that's how it is. So I think, all of these things are driving people towards saying, do I want to spend this much of my time on it?
So, how does this shift into connection economy? How should brands be allocating their budget and allocating their efforts differently now?
Sure. Look, as I said, any marketer will know there's a marketing mix, and you've got to use all the tools in the toolkit, depending on what you're trying to do. If you're going for reach, if you're going for awareness, compared to if you're going for engagement or salience or conversion. And what we would say is experiential and experiences have got a really good role to play, part of each stage of the marketing funnel. And with this change in behaviors, I think brands are seeing that you can do some much more interesting things that become much more engaging for people. And it changes the way that it changes the mindset that people are in when they engage with your brand, when they're going through experiences, right? So if you're starting to think about how do we build trust? How do we help people to start to think of themselves as being part of this brand? Experiences are overwhelmingly powerful a way of doing that, right? When you have your hands on the product, when you're with other people who do these sorts of things, when you're doing the things that you enjoy doing and the brand is there, like that is the moment when you really start to, close that brand self gap.
So let's geek out a little bit. Why does an in person experience stick in the memory and impact somebody in a way that a digital ad on their feed doesn't?
For sure. Okay, so this is really interesting because this goes to the heart of kind of the neuroscience of how memories are formed and how things are stored in our brains. So when we go through an experience, or when when we pick up information, go through an experience, our brain is constantly processing it. We have to just discard most of the information that comes to us. I mean, I cannot remember what happened yesterday when I was walking down the street, right? Loads of information, but my brain just has to discard it because otherwise I'd go absolutely mad. So your brain is constantly kind of in the background processing what's going on, and then your amygdala, which is kind of down in your lizard brain, is tagging the moments for emotional relevance that need to be remembered, right? So like it processes the memory and it's tagging information for emotional relevance. And it's those tags which it's almost like the filing system that that you can then like go back and you remember things. Okay. So if you've got that picture in your brain now, when we experience something, we're getting so much more input from it. It's hitting us on every sensory level. Okay. So richness of information coming in, but also experiences are much more emotionally engaging. Okay. If you do it well, it's really kind of creating this emotional response in you. And those emotional responses create sort of bigger tags, if you like, to extend the metaphor. So if you think about you've created this experience as a brand and you've now achieved this kind of tagging in the person's memory. And because it's a positive emotion, it's got this like big kind of, pick me tag. And then what researchers find is that what this can do is that this can shift people's salience for the brand at the moment when they're evaluating something. So let's say I'm in the market for a new car and I'm kind of shopping around. Well, if I had in the past had this really fantastic experience from a brand, at that moment, I may not even realize it. But when I'm starting to evaluate, these memories will come back to me, and it can just create this sort of unfair advantage, if you like, in the mind of the consumer, and may or may not be that we're aware of it, but you just have this sense of brand salience because of this deeply tagged positive memory that you have that's associated with that brand.
Do brands need to, so they've built up this big tab in their prospect or their ideal audience in their brains, a bigger folder. Should brands also invest in, okay, how do we follow up and make sure that we're still around them on the internet in addition to this?
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Because you obviously you're trying to you're trying to increase the frequency, but you also what you're trying to do is start to build what's called neural pathways. Okay. So this is where you start to get stronger memories and they overlay on top of each other. And over time, these consistent positive connections can then create these neural pathways where you can almost go the other way, where when you see a brand, you just feel great. You look at it and it puts you into a good mood. And I think, I can think of one or two brands when I see them, it just, I feel good. I think some of that might be down to the communication. Some of it might be down to I think a lot of it might be down to the experience that I have of that brand, of the product. What am I doing when I'm using this product? I'm into trail running. I've got favorite pairs of shoes, and those brands, when I look at them, huge amounts of positive associations for me. So I think, that's the sweet spot that you want to get to. And I think this is a really interesting shift on salience. Actually, you're trying to get people to a place where, as a marketer, rather than saying, when people see my brand, I want them to think of something, is you want to get to a place where you can say, when people feel a certain way or when people do a certain thing, they think of my brand.
Flipped it.
Then like
Yeah.
that's when you're in the good space, right? Because it's like, yes, I want to, rather than pushing it to people like, hey, think of me, I want to be in the place where when somebody's doing the thing they love, they're associating me with it.
As a marketer, this is so fascinating. As a consumer, I'm like, how many things are in my brain that I
Yeah.
hit?
But what's that filing cabinet? This is where experiences and experiential marketing are a really great way to do it. And this is why I love working in the sector, right? Because what you're trying to do is people love experiences. Okay. Like you and I, like what do I do on the weekend? I invest in experiences. I invest in time with my family, doing things I love. Like all of those things are experiences. So from a marketing point of view, you're creating things that people walk towards. They love them, right? And so what you can do is, to get to that golden moment where when people are doing the thing they love, they think of your brand. Well, why don't you start laying on some of those things that they love, and wrap your brand around it? And and it's so cool because you're giving people something that they want, and it's a real win-win.
You have a pretty cool job. Do you do you have a story of a it could be more than one, but of one of your favorite activations or events that you've done?
Sure. So we did one for Ford a while ago, which I really love. We called it Go Faster, and it was essentially what we were trying to do is get people behind the wheel of the vehicle. Because Ford are, I mean, they're so lucky because I think they were named the number one American brand, or the top American brand of the last 100 years by Time Magazine recently. I mean, there's very few brands which are not as well known and well recognized. Okay, so they don't have an awareness problem. Everyone knows Ford, but the problem with that is that also everybody thinks they know everything they need to know about a Ford. They're kind of like your mind's made up.
Mhm.
So it can be a blessing and a curse. And so one of the things we were trying to do is get people behind the wheel, because what we knew is that for people who have a certain, like perhaps not great preconception of the vehicle, research showed that if you can get them behind the wheel, it shifts, right? The experience of it changes the perception. So you're trying to get people over that, and it's really hard to do that through communications, because it's like, please don't tell me, like I know what I know.
Yeah.
What if you're just telling me stories? I trust myself. And so that was the challenge. So what is that? Well, in everyday language, that's a test drive, right?
Mhm.
So, that's what everyone's trying to do. But if you have a preconception of a brand, well, you're probably not going to take a test drive because you're like, unless you're really, I don't know, the boot is the right size or something. So what we did is we designed this experience called Go Faster. And rather than call it a test drive, we created it as a stunt driver experience, where you learnt how to be a stunt driver for an afternoon. But beyond that, we then wrapped a bit of storytelling around it. So we created a heist movie that didn't exist, but it looked like it did. And you had a role in the movie, so you were the getaway driver.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking Baby Driver, great film. So you got to be the getaway driver. So the experience was that you had to turn up on the film set and you had to play the getaway driver. And so anybody who signed up to the experience, they got sent their sort of pre-brief. They got given lanyards. It was the experience. It felt like you were walking onto a movie set. You then got into the vehicle. You did a bunch of really cool driving stunts and exercises. You learned how to drift. You were throwing donuts. You did all the cool stuff. At the same time, we were filming people inside the vehicle. And so everybody who went through this experience had this, great time. It was a couple of hours of just like super cool. And then you walked away with a souvenir, which was the trailer for the film, with everything cut together, but the getaway driver was you, because we filmed you inside the vehicle.
Man, that is
And
cool.
it was cool, and people loved it. The level of sharing that we got off the back of that souvenir that we gave people, because of course, it's like when you do something cool, you tell your friends about it,
Yeah,
and you
man.
send the film. So that was great from the sort of salience point of view. But then the real kicker was that actually it was a high value experience. It's the sort of thing that you might do on a Saturday. And so besides the fact that it was a great experience, actually we charged people for it, and people paid, I don't know, around $100 a ticket. So it was a premium, high quality experience. People walked away with a massive smile on their face. They told all their friends about it. Huge kind of halo effects from a kind of communications point of view, but also meet the brief, right? Also walked
Yeah.
away saying, "This car is amazing. I had a great time." And for me, like we talk about a win-win. I think that's just it's a cool example of a win-win where how many people would pay to take a test drive?
Right? I was just thinking, people are trying to get people into the dealership. Come on, come in for free and test drive, please.
Yeah,
Versus no, pay to test drive because it's
yeah.
different when it's something fun that you want to do.
It's something you want to do. And it's kind of ticks a bunch of boxes of not everybody could do it. You had to be there. All of those like really interesting kind of psychological boxes that need to be hit for people to feel that this thing is valuable.
I took a Cialdini course last year, and that just hit a lot of the influence things that he
There
tells you
you
to
go.
do.
There you go.
So talk to us about the decision to charge for an experience.
Yeah.
If somebody's thinking, should I charge or should I not charge for the experience? How
Yeah.
do you figure that out?
Yeah. Look, I don't think it's a science, but what we know from, again, like geek out on the academic research, we know that when people pay for things, they think about them and they value them differently. So that's first thing to think about, right? Is you'll get when you're thinking about experiential marketing, your audience are in a different mindset. If it's free, they're like, if something's free, you don't value it. If you've paid just a small amount for something, you start to think, actually, this is quite valuable. Have you heard of this is kind of similar. Have you heard of something called the IKEA effect? So the IKEA, you have to make your own furniture. Yeah. So the IKEA effect, the researchers found if when people had built the thing themselves, then when they'd invested something in it, it was more valuable to them. They did the research. They kind of got people to build the piece, and then they showed them a piece which was perfect, and then they offered to buy it off them. And people, said, no, 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 I want this one. The one that I made is the one that really counts. And it's kind of in that world of, when I'm invested in something, when I've put something of myself into it, it feels more valuable to me.
Mm. People
So
more likely to show up too if they've paid.
people are more likely to show up. That's a huge thing when you're doing events and experiential. You've always got to overbook it because, like, when it's free, it's like, I'll book it, but maybe I'll just cancel. So there can be some of that functional stuff around why you might choose to charge for it. The effectiveness piece around people will value it more. We did an interesting piece of research where we took paid for events and free events, and we looked at how people were talking about them online and kind of analyzed the language of it. And what we found was people, they say a lot more. So we're looking at reviews, for example, online reviews. I think on average, it was like, if it wasn't twice as much, it was almost that people write about something when they paid for it. Okay. They've got more to say about it. They used way more adjectives, which was meant they were like more engaged and they were more positive about the thing when they, when they paid for it. So you can see that back to the conversation about the memory tagging, the thing that they paid for is stuck in their memory. They've got way more associations with it. And so, that's obviously, again, another benefit. You also get, well, you need to consider that you're going to get a different type of audience. So you're going to get people who are really invested in this thing. Like, it's not just any old person. And I think that's the other problem with, with sampling, for example, like how much of your sampling just people pick it up and then they throw it in the trash, because they're just not. So you're kind of like pre-filtering for people who are predisposed to you as a brand or to the category that you're playing in. So all of those things, like payment is a great filter. It's a great filter. It can create that value, as we said. But yeah, it is a choice that you make. And we know from, working with clients, you do have to be a bit brave as a
Mhm.
marketer to do it, because I think there's a fear that you will piss people off. Like, why should they be paying for it? And I think you do have to, you have to be aware of that. And you have to, like, being aware of it means that you understand value exchange, that if I charge for something, it's got to feel worth it. And we have to figure out, like, what is, with the Go Faster driving experience, that was a high price point, but it was a super high value. Like, you got to drive a performance car with a stunt driver, learn how to do things you could never do on the road. Like, got to feel like, yeah, feels worth it.
And it was a good value, just so you know, because they have the racetrack, the NASCAR big racetrack in Charlotte
Right.
here. And all
Yeah.
you do is go around in circles, which is still cool. And that costs like $200 for
There
30
you go.
minutes.
Yeah.
I don't even get a video after
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
The other thing, yes, you need to be brave as a marketer, but I think you also need to shift your thinking in line with how consumers expectations and openness is shifting towards experiences from brands. So what I mean is that traditionally, when we thought about entertainment, we would go, oh, that lives with, movies and, theme parks. Ford should not be bringing me that sort of entertainment. And I think in the last 10 years or so, we've seen a huge openness from people to have these types of experiences from any category. So like chocolate brands, Hershey's has a theme park, of course they do. I can imagine what's there, I'd like to visit. So, as brands have become more prominent in people's lives, I think that those category boundaries have broken down a bit, and people are super open to having broader experiences from brands. I think from a marketing point of view, it means that traditionally experiential, if you think of the 4 Ps of marketing, right? Promotion, place, price, and product, right? Traditionally experiential and agencies have lived in the promotion P. And they're
Mhm.
like, this is what we do. We do promotions, and everybody understands it, and we're in that world. But I think the boundaries are really blurred, and a lot of this stuff can now sit in the product P. And people are going, okay, I get that you're a shoe company and you make shoes, like shoes of your products, or, the classic one, Red Bull, drinks are your products, but actually entertainment can be your product as well. And so for brand managers and owners to start to think about the product and go, well, maybe experiential can live within my product as well, which is what people are buying. So that sort of breaking of that boundary, I think, makes it easier to charge people for these things when it's right. And again, you use the same product thinking around what's the value exchange, what's the value proposition.
For a long time, still, brands are the sponsors of other events, and they're
Yeah.
just kind of, there's my logo at this event, or there's my little booth in the corner at this event.
Yeah.
How can a marketer flip to say, no, no, we're the event. We're
Yeah.
big enough to do our own event?
Yeah. Yeah. I think they totally can. And we've been doing some really exciting work with Visa, for example. We just did around music,
Mm.
and creating, Visa have created this amazing proposition called Visa Live, which is all around music, where Visa gives superfans access to amazing gigs in amazing places. And it's like only they could do it. So we did Benson Boone in the Rocket Garden down at Kennedy Space Center. Amazing. Like such a cool concert, so well matched. Like Benson Boone's got such a strong history with space. And that really that was a brand kind of taking ownership and saying like, yeah, we're not sponsoring, like we're enabling this thing. So it's totally doable. And I think that the way that you need to do it is firstly to understand the sort of audience passion point that you want to play to. Like, what do you want to own? Do you want to own music? Do you want to own sport? Do you want to own wellness? There's so many different areas of experiences. And then obviously ensuring that it's aligned with your customer, like your customer segment, your target, who you're going after, and finding that perfect match, which, you've got a right to do it. You have a unique ability to create something, and you're then opening it up to these people. I think that's the recipe. And, a lot of it happens around understanding those niches that you want to play to, the passion points, what people are after. And the brands that do it really well are start with communities, really understanding the community that exists around a brand. Harley Davidson is a great example. You know, we've done festivals for Harley where, yeah, it's like, sure, it's a bike brand, but like, of course they'd have a festival and it's 3 days and, there's all sorts of, and then ends with a concert and, that, and it works because there's this amazing community around the brand and you look at what they're doing and you serve it.
And everybody gets there on their Harley.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one's flying in. Everyone's driving across the whole country to
Everyone's
get there.
driving. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So if a company's thinking, I don't know how to bring my brand to come alive like a Red Bull event, or to make my brand like an action movie, or um, around concerts. Does working with a firm like yours, do you play and help them figure out what is the best way to connect with the audience you want to connect with?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I talked at the beginning about win-win. That's really how we think about it. It's got to start with what people care about. what are they, and what I was saying about experiences, like these are the things we love to do. So what do people love to do? And what uniquely about the group of people that you want to, influence, affect, engage with, like what do they really care about? You have a deep understanding of that. And then, really strong understanding of your brand. What's our unique right to play within this space? What have we got that other people don't have? Like we often talk about unfair advantage. What's our unfair advantage in this field? And if you can identify those things, you can bring them together in concepts like the stunt driver experience, or festivals that are, yeah, they're really magical. They get people talking, and it can even create a platform where it's something that could be touring. And with some of our clients, we've even started to create pieces of IP. So it's a touring experience, which ultimately, perhaps it could be licensed, and you're starting to look at new propositions and even business models. So yeah, sorry, the really long answer to say, absolutely, that's what we do. We love doing it. And it's just such a, and with clients, it's a really fun thing to be doing because it's an innovation challenge. You're saying like, I've got a great brand, like what else could we be doing? Where else could we go?
I think having outside people come in and look at you, look at me, and look at what you're doing differently can help a lot too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's when agency client relationships are great, is when you've got, on the client side, you've got people who are really passionate about the product and the brand, and they really understand it, and they know the things that no one else can know. And on the agency side, you've got people who are curious, people who are like willing to like ask some dangerous questions or suggest things that maybe, at first glance wouldn't be right, but it gets to an interesting place.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where the magic happens.
The internal team's too afraid to ask because Stuart might flip out, but you're like, "I don't know Stuart. I don't know if he's gonna flip out about this
Exactly.
question."
Yeah, I'll be the deflector. Tell them it
Yeah.
was my idea.
There's a CMO or CEO listening right now, and they're like, "I feel like we should try some IRL." What would be a little nugget or piece of advice you'd want them to walk away with?
Well, if it's I feel we should try, I would say a 100% you should. Like this is IRL is it's a place where you can experiment as well. It doesn't have to be big. These are things that, they happen, they're out there in the real world, and you can try stuff and see what works. And 100% you always learn something. You're meeting real people. You're getting out there and seeing people engage with your product, with your brand. And that, I think that's an unsung benefit that people don't really consider for experiential. It's like closest to customers. Like brand, like bad marketers tend to sit in offices and talk to themselves about their own brand. Great marketers are mostly curious about what the world thinks about their brand and their product. And experiential gives you that opportunity over and over and over. It's just huge amounts of insight alongside all of the benefits we've talked about.
This has been so fun. I'm gonna look through your site and see examples of more experiences, and I'll link below so people can read all your articles and check out
Amazing.
Imagination. We like to ask everybody who comes on, what's one book? I know I see books,
Yeah,
show, or podcast that you're loving these days?
sure. Can I give you a book and a podcast?
Yeah.
So I have been mostly reading fiction in the last year or two.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been good for like reading fitness, but I find that fiction, I think yeah, you process it differently. And I read a really great fiction book. I think the best book about AI that I've read. I mean, there's so much out there about AI. It's just it's a bit of a fire hose. But it's an author called Richard Powers, American author. He wrote a book called The Overstory, which won the Pulitzer a couple years ago. But sorry, he wrote The Overstory. But the book that I read was called Playground. It's it's really, really cool. Like structurally, it's really interesting. The story is great, and I think it's the first great AI book that's been written. And then podcasts, yeah, I love podcasts. I think one of the ones that is constantly new for me is, do you know Conversations with Tyler?
Mm-mm.
Tyler Cowen. So he's an economist, and he what I like about him is just his curiosity. He interviews the broadest section of people, and he asks the sharpest questions, just really pointed. So, you'll always learn something. You may or may not agree with everything, but boy, will you learn a lot. So Conversations with Tyler, is my other go-to for curiosity.
Listen to it just to learn how to ask even better questions. So
Yeah.
I got these 2 jotted down. And then what's one thing that you're personally learning or working on this year?
Learning or working on. So I'm going to go with, so not IRL. I'm doing loads of IRL stuff. Not IRL. 20 years ago, I was a coder. I taught myself how to code, and I wrote like front end, back end code back in the days where you had to actually write it. That was a long time ago, but I discovered Base 44 recently, which is, one of these coding platforms that enables you to build apps. So I'm looking forward to building an app which is completely nothing to do with work, but more to do with training schedules and that sort of thing for some of my running. I'm looking forward to learning, how to build apps again.
And it is it's like tech, but it's also creativity. You get to imagine what
Totally.
you can do with it.
And you can go so far so quickly with it.
I
Yeah.
haven't built an app yet, but maybe this year we'll both share what we've done.
I think it's an achievable goal.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was a hoot and a half, and we'll link below so everyone can follow you and follow Imagination.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me, Chelsey.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.